Federalism, that's next. This is a really fundamental concept in AP government that you need to really understand well and be able to apply it. So we're looking at federalism. So Unit 1, Card 26. This is actually our second part of Unit 1. So we've already done the first part, which is really the foundations of America. And now we're looking at another concept that's really our whole second part here is about this idea of federalism. Everything ties to this. All right, flip over, really quick card here, and then we're going to do a couple other applications of federalism. All right, so federalism, as defined, is a division of power between a central or federal government and state governments. So you have a national government, but you also have states. I'll read it again. A division of power between a central or federal government and state governments. Think of Canada, which has a national government in Ottawa, and then it also has provinces. Germany has a federal government, and it also has states. India is a federal government. They have lots of states, and then they have a national government. So there's two governments and lots of governments in these countries, and they each have separate powers. Like the national government does one thing, and the state governments have other roles. Matter of fact, we're going to talk about those roles in a minute. But because of federalism, what you end up with is that different laws and different policy just meaning like laws and in the society, and these things can be different in different states. So let's just take a look at that real quick. Here's marijuana laws by states. The dark green ones, it's fully legal. The lighter green ones is that it's not fully legal yet, but expected to be. And also the lighter green, it's medical marijuana, so it's not fully. It's got medical marijuana. And then the orange states, it is illegal. So why is this? Federalism. Each state can choose for itself whether it wants to have marijuana legal or not. And theoretically, as an American, if you didn't like the laws in your state, you could move to another state. Okay. Here's maximum speed limit by state. You see the dark blue in the right, in the east. Those are all 70 miles an hour is the max speed limit. Look at the differences. Look at the extremes. California is the light green one. 55 is the max speed limit in California, but Texas, it's 85. When you're looking at a chart like this, you want to look for trends. And also you want to think, why? What explains the difference? What is it about Texas that makes it a place where you'd have an 85 mile per hour speed limit, but then California has a 55? Why? So you want to be able to think about those things. That's really important when you're looking at data and maps in AP government, is to really be thinking logically about like what the data tells you. All right, awesome. All right, we're doing a couple more cards. We got 3 more left, and we're talking about how federalism works and how different powers exist at different levels of government. Some power is at the federal, some powers at the state. So we're going to look at that. And the first type of powers we're looking at is 1.27 exclusive powers. 1.27 exclusive powers. And you think of exclusive, you think is like something that's only for one person. It's exclusive. Like, and in this case, it's powers that are only the federal government has. All right, so here we go. Backside flip. So write the top part, please. Powers that only the federal government has. And then I'm going to have some bullet points of several things that is a power of the federal government. All right, bullet point 1, coin money. This was a major problem in the Articles of Confederation because the states were creating their own money, and then they were inflating that currency, and no one could keep track of like what it was worth, and it was kind of a real hot mess. So the new government is going to have only the power. The federal government is going to have the power to coin money. This is a little bit like the Europeans with the euro. They have one currency. It makes trade easy. It makes commerce easier. And so that was kind of the idea as well here. Another power. Treaties and foreign affairs. That was actually true in the Articles of Confederation, except there was no executive branch to like enforce it. So that was problematic. So treaties and foreign affairs, that's exclusive to the federal government. Remember, exclusive means it's only the federal government that can do it. Regulate interstate commerce. Interstate commerce. This is a power given in Article 1 of the Constitution called the Commerce Clause. And basically anything that crosses state lines, and even some things that don't cross state lines but are made with things that did cross state lines, Congress has the power to regulate, according to the Supreme Court. Territories. We don't really have many anymore. There's some islands in the Pacific like Guam or, other places like the Virgin Islands. But territories are regulated only by the federal government. Armed services, Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Coast Guard. Armed services, only national government. There is a state role with the National Guard, which kind of plays the role of the quote-unquote militia, as they called it in the Constitution. But even then, that can be federalized, meaning that the president can call up the National Guard and make it a federal power. He can take control of that. War. Only the national government can declare war. So these are, again, exclusive powers. You need to be able to sort these, like which one goes with which type of power. Right now we got exclusive powers, only federal government. Pause if you need to. All right, next one, concurrent power. Concurrent, 1.28. Concurrent power. All right, let's look at those. Those are powers that are shared by both the federal and state government. So both can do it. Fed can do it. State can do it. First one, tax. Tax. Under the Articles of Confederation, only the states could tax. The federal government would levy a tax, but then couldn't collect it. So in reality, they really couldn't tax. So that's a real problem. They were waiting on the states to give it. So powers that both federal and state share. One is tax. Two is borrow money. Both can borrow money. A lot of states have a constitutional amendment to their state constitution that requires a balanced budget every single year, and it doesn't allow them to borrow money. A lot of states have that, but the federal government does not. So the federal government borrows money like crazy. And that's a real problem. We'll talk about that. All right, courts. Both there is federal courts and there are state courts. There are state crime laws. There are federal crime laws. And so depending on what crime you commit, the federal government may swoop in and take over that court case. And the state basically has to cede that case to the federal government if the federal government can lay claim to that, depending on what it is. Tax, borrow money, courts. Crime and punishment. There are federal prisons. There are state prisons. Obviously, if the states and the federal government can run courts, then they can do crime and they can do punishment, which of course they do. Both states and the federal government can claim land for public use. Claim land for public use. And the big reason for that is roads, parks. Those are big ones. Those are concurrent powers. All right, lastly, and we're done with this lesson, is, again, we're talking about federalism and how some powers are for the federal government, some are for the state government, or some for the national government, some for the state governments. And now we're looking at reserved powers. Well, if you figure that exclusive is for the federal government and concurrent means they both have it, then you probably already figured out that reserved powers are ones that are for the states, 1.29. All right, these are powers only states, and I put supposed to have because the federal government now in the 2000s has a lot of power over these things, and they do that through grant systems, which we're going to talk about with federalism. But they offer the states money, and then they say, but if you want the money, guess what? You got to do X, Y, and Z. And then the states who always want the money will do X, Y, and Z. And so now the federal government has learned how to control things like education. So education in schools is not mentioned in the Constitution. Therefore, the federal government is supposed to have no role. But they do have a role. And they have a Department of Education at the national level now. Since the presidency of Jimmy Carter in the late 70s, there's been a Department of Education. And how do they get control over education, even though they're not supposed to in the Constitution. They do it through grants. We will give you money, but you must do X, Y, or Z. And all the states line up for the money. And so, therefore, the federal government has power over the states when it comes to education on some level. Licenses like marriage licenses or driver's licenses or licenses for a profession, to become a person who does, who cuts hair or who's a mechanic or some sort of license, whatever it would be. States have power over that. Regulating alcohol. In Virginia, they have the ABC stores, and those are stores that regulate alcohol. This is kind of left over from Prohibition, frankly. They can establish local governments. If you go to New England, the town is the major local government and has a lot of power. Counties just don't matter in New England. Like you belong in a county, and it's like so. But in the South, if you go there, the counties are very powerful, and the town doesn't really matter. It's almost like just like a geographical location. Like, yeah, you go over to X, and it's like it's just a area. It doesn't really have power, but because the county does. So different governments can be established by the states, and they can establish local governments. Police are a local government power, although again, the national government can have sway over police forces through the grant system, through giving money and then requiring things if they want the money. Elections. Elections are actually controlled at the local level, not the federal level. Matter of fact, in the Constitution, it says that states, whoever a state allows to vote for the lowest house, meaning like the House of Representatives in that state, that person can vote in federal elections. So there is no requirement in the original Constitution that only white men could vote or only propertied men could vote or anything like that. There were no requirements to the Constitution. The Constitution actually was quite progressive in this aspect, which was you can let anybody who you want to vote. If they can vote for the lower house, then they can vote. So you didn't technically need a constitutional amendment to allow African Americans to vote. You didn't need a constitutional amendment to get women to vote. States could make it happen, and a lot of states did. There were quite a few freedmen or people that used to be slaves, freed black people, who actually voted in the North. Particularly in Massachusetts and other places up in the North, they allowed freed blacks to vote. There were women who voted in states long before the 19th Amendment. Of course, Wyoming being the first place, but then other states followed. There were a lot of states. Now, we needed the amendments to allow blacks to vote and women to vote because there were states that still weren't allowing them to vote, but the Constitution didn't need to be changed to allow the states to change it themselves. The states could and did. And so the Constitution was quite progressive in allowing change to happen in that regard in terms of voting. But elections themselves, state power. All right, awesome. That's it for that. This is the lesson. I hope you enjoyed that. You got to practice this one. You got to know what goes in each category. I've got some good sorts for you to do and practice that and make sure you do that. All right, bye, guys.